Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, let's start with a simple question. Have you ever wondered how you understand what you are reading, like you are doing right now? Well, that is exactly what cognitive psychology tries to explain. Cognitive psychology is the scientific study of mental processes such as perceiving things, remembering information, reasoning through problems, and even thinking about ideas. Psychologists study these mental processes because, from ancient times, humans have been curious about how the mind works, and also because they believe that our behavior is deeply connected to how our mind processes things. For example, right now, you are reading this course material. At one level, your brain is working to perceive the words and understand their meaning. But at another level, you also have a bigger goal, maybe to complete this course, earn a degree, and build a good career. So your reading behavior is influenced by your goals and your plans, which are all mental activities. Mental processes like intentionality, goals, and plans have a powerful impact on our behavior. In short, studying these mental processes is very important because they are the foundation of why we behave the way we do. Alright, now let's understand how research is done in cognitive psychology. To know the specific methods used, first we must understand the main goals of research in this field. In short, the goals include gathering data, analyzing that data carefully, developing strong theories, forming hypotheses, testing those hypotheses, and even applying the findings outside the research lab into the real world. But cognitive psychologists are not just interested in knowing what happens in thinking, they are even more interested in understanding how and why thinking happens the way it does. So, researchers do not just describe mental processes like memory or reasoning, they also try to explain them deeply. And to do this, they have to go beyond what is seen directly. They make smart inferences, that means, based on what they observe, they figure out hidden processes happening inside the mind. This way, cognitive psychologists move from just simple observations to meaningful explanations. Exciting, right? Let's continue. Now, let's explore the distinctive research methods used in cognitive psychology. To understand how humans think, cognitive psychologists apply a variety of methods. First, experiments on human behavior. These are usually conducted in laboratory settings where researchers carefully control the environment. In any experiment, there are two important variables: the independent variable, which is manipulated, and the dependent variable, which is the outcome measured. Other variables are held constant, called control variables. Researchers must select a random and representative sample and maintain strict control over conditions. When done properly, experiments allow researchers to infer cause and effect relationships between variables. Second, psychobiological research. This method explores the link between brain activity and cognitive abilities. There are three main ways. First, postmortem studies, where the brains of individuals are examined after death to connect brain structures to cognitive abilities. Second, using brain imaging techniques to study individuals with cognitive deficits like memory loss or speech difficulties to identify abnormalities. Third, real-time monitoring of brain activity while people perform tasks, revealing which brain areas are active during different cognitive processes. Third, we have self-reports, case studies, and naturalistic observation. In self-reports, participants describe their own thoughts or behaviors, offering direct but sometimes subjective information. Case studies involve a detailed examination of a single person or small group, especially useful for rare cognitive phenomena. In naturalistic observation, researchers observe people in real life settings, providing rich, real world insights without manipulation. Finally, there is computer simulation and artificial intelligence. Researchers create computer models that simulate human thinking, memory, or problem solving. By comparing the computer's performance to human behavior, Psychologists can test theories about how the mind works. Work in artificial intelligence, building machines that can think or learn, also informs our understanding of human cognition by highlighting what tasks are easy or difficult for minds versus machines. In all these methods, cognitive psychologists aim to understand, predict, and sometimes improve human thinking. Domains of cognitive psychology. Cognitive neuroscience. Today, cognitive psychologists and neuroscientists work closely together. Psychologists seek neurological explanations for mental processes, while neuroscientists use cognitive theories to interpret brain activity. Every thought or memory involves electrochemical processes in the brain and nervous system. Perception studies how we detect and interpret sensory stimuli. Humans are highly sensitive to sensory input, but cognitive psychology focuses on how we interpret these signals to guide behavior. Yet, perception alone isn't enough. Processes like attention and memory also shape what we experience. Pattern recognition. Environmental stimuli are rarely isolated. We experience sights, sounds, and smells as part of meaningful patterns. For example, when reading, we don't just see random marks, we instantly organize them into letters and words. Pattern recognition is crucial for making sense of the world. Attention is our ability to selectively focus on certain stimuli while ignoring others. Since we can't process everything at once, attention determines which information reaches our conscious awareness and influences our decisions. Consciousness is our awareness of ourselves and our environment. It integrates perception, memory, decision making, and other processes. Cognitive psychologists study how consciousness emerges and how it guides thought and behavior. Memory allows us to store and retrieve information across time. Cognitive psychology investigates different types of memory, like short term, long term, and working memory, and how these systems support learning and decision making. Representation of knowledge. This area explores how information is organized mentally, such as through mental images, concepts, or schemas. Understanding how knowledge is structured helps explain how we reason, plan, and solve problems. Imagery studies how we form mental pictures without external input. For example, visualizing a friend's face or imagining a future event relies on mental imagery, an important component of thinking and memory.
Language research focuses on how we produce, understand, and acquire language. Cognitive psychology studies how linguistic knowledge is structured in the mind and how it interacts with thought processes. Developmental studies track how cognitive abilities grow and change across the lifespan, from early childhood to old age. This helps reveal the stages and influences behind cognitive growth. Thinking and reasoning. This area investigates how we solve problems, make decisions, and engage in logical reasoning. Cognitive psychology examines the processes behind everyday thinking and expert problem solving. Artificial intelligence research creates computer programs that simulate human cognitive processes. Studying AI helps cognitive psychologists understand the principles underlying human intelligence by comparing machine and human problem solving.
Where does knowledge come from? And how is it represented in the mind? These eternal questions have fascinated humankind for centuries and remain fundamental to cognitive psychology today. Throughout history, two primary schools of thought have emerged. Empiricists believe that knowledge comes from experience through our interactions with the environment. Nativists argue that knowledge is based on innate structures and characteristics of the brain, something we are born with. From a scientific point of view, neither perspective can be definitively proven, and the debate between empiricism and nativism continues even today. If we look back at ancient civilizations, we find evidence of early curiosity about the nature of knowledge. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics suggest that Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of thought and memory. This idea was echoed by the early Greek philosopher Aristotle, who also believed that knowledge resided in the heart. However, Plato disagreed. He proposed that it was the brain that served as the true locus of knowledge and thought. These early ideas laid the groundwork for how later thinkers would approach the mysteries of cognition. Moving forward to the Renaissance, there was a significant shift in thinking. Philosophers and theologians of this period generally agreed that the brain, not the heart, was the center of knowledge. Moreover, Renaissance scholars proposed that knowledge was gained through more than just pure reasoning or divine insight. They suggested two main pathways for acquiring knowledge: through the physical senses, the mundus sensibilis, or the world of senses; through abstract thought, the mundus intelligibilis, or the world of understanding. This dual pathway reflected a deeper understanding of human cognition, where both sensory experience and internal reasoning were seen as crucial for learning and knowledge acquisition. The Renaissance thus marked a significant evolution in the way knowledge, thought, and cognition were conceptualized. The modern period, current ideas and methods. In the modern era, cognitive psychology has advanced tremendously, using scientific methods to study thinking, memory, and perception. The focus today is not only on describing how people think but also on explaining the mechanisms underlying cognitive processes. Researchers use sophisticated experiments, computational models, and neurological techniques to understand how the brain supports cognition. Modern cognitive psychology freely draws from multiple disciplines, including neuroscience, linguistics, computer science, and philosophy, to form a rich and comprehensive understanding of mental processes. Today's cognitive psychologists aim to explore cognition at a deeper level, linking observable behavior to internal mental operations and even to brain activity itself. In the 1950s, psychologists once again started focusing on key mental processes that had been largely set aside during the era of behaviorism. Areas of interest included attention, memory, pattern recognition, mental imagery, semantic organization, language processes, thinking, consciousness, and other cognitive topics that were once considered beyond the boundaries of experimental psychology. New professional groups were formed, and new academic journals were established, signaling the growing momentum of cognitive psychology. As the field matured, it became clear that this was a new brand of psychology, distinctly different from the traditions dominant in the 1930s and 1940s. Several major forces were responsible for this neocognitive revolution. Information processing. Cognitive psychology adopted the concept of the mind as an information processor, much like a computer, receiving, storing, and using information systematically. The failure of behaviorism. Behaviorism, which focused only on observable stimulus response behaviors, failed to account for the richness and diversity of human behavior, especially in areas like language. Moreover, critical psychological topics like memory, attention, consciousness, thinking, and imagery were either ignored or inadequately explained by behaviorists, highlighting the need for a new approach that addressed these internal mental processes. The emergence of communication theory. Advances in fields like signal detection, attention studies, cybernetics, and information theory provided powerful new models for understanding how information is processed by humans. These developments were directly relevant to cognitive psychology and spurred experimental research into how people perceive, attend to, and respond to information. Modern linguistics. Transformations in linguistic theory, particularly new perspectives on language structure and grammar, influenced how psychologists thought about cognitive processes. Language was no longer seen as simply a learned behavior but as a complex, rule-governed system that revealed much about human thought. Memory research. Research into verbal learning and semantic organization offered a strong empirical foundation for understanding memory. These studies led to the development of theoretical models of memory systems and also encouraged the creation of testable models for other areas of cognitive functioning. Computer science and other technological advances. The rise of computer science, and particularly its subfield of artificial intelligence, AI, had a profound influence on cognitive psychology. Computers, as information processing machines, offered a metaphor for understanding the mind, leading psychologists to re-examine mental activities such as problem-solving, decision-making, and reasoning. Key issues in the study of cognitive psychology. When reviewing the major ideas in cognitive psychology, we find that certain fundamental themes run across the entire field. These core issues are often discussed dialectically, highlighting different perspectives. Nature versus nurture. Which has a greater influence on human cognition, nature or nurture? If innate characteristics are believed to be more important, research would focus on studying these inborn traits. If the environment is considered more influential, research would aim to explore how environmental factors shape cognitive development. Rationalism versus empiricism. How should we discover truth about ourselves and the world? Should we rely on logical reasoning based on existing knowledge, rationalism, or should we focus on observations and empirical testing based on sensory experiences, empiricism? Cognitive psychology seeks to balance theory with empirical methods to learn as much as possible about mental phenomena. Structures versus processes. Should the emphasis be on studying the structures of the mind, its contents, attributes, and products? Or should the focus be on the processes involved in human thinking, such as how we reason, problem solve, and make decisions? Domain generality versus domain specificity. Are cognitive processes domain general, meaning they operate across many different areas? Or are they domain specific, meaning the processes observed in one area may not necessarily apply to others? This question explores how broad or specialized cognitive mechanisms really are. Validity of causal inferences versus ecological validity. Should research prioritize highly controlled experiments to strengthen causal inferences? Or should it emphasize ecologically valid methods, studying cognition in naturalistic settings that better reflect real world experiences? Applied versus basic research. Should we focus on basic research that examines fundamental cognitive processes for theoretical understanding? Or should we engage in applied research that aims to solve real world problems and help people use cognitive strategies effectively? Biological versus behavioral methods. This issue asks whether cognitive processes should be studied through biological methods like brain imaging and neuroscience, or through behavioral methods such as observing actions and responses in experimental tasks. When we dive into cognitive psychology, there are a few key ideas that come up again and again, no matter what specific topic we are studying. First, data in cognitive psychology can only be fully understood when placed within a larger explanatory theory. But at the same time, theories without solid empirical data are meaningless. Second, cognition is generally adaptive. It helps us survive and thrive, though it's not perfect in every situation. Third, cognitive processes don't work in isolation. They constantly interact with each other and with non-cognitive processes like emotions and motivations. Fourth, to truly study cognition, we need to use a variety of scientific methods, experiments, observations, case studies, and even simulations. Finally, there's a strong link between research and real-world applications. Basic research often leads to practical solutions, and applied research often uncovers deeper, theoretical insights. One major influence on cognitive psychology is the computer metaphor. Although thinkers like Pascal and Descartes imagined mechanical calculators centuries ago, it wasn't until the invention of high-speed digital computers about 50 years ago that real working models emerged. Initially, computers were viewed mainly as powerful tools for rapid number crunching. However, it soon became evident that they could also mimic certain aspects of human problem-solving abilities. Still, important differences remained. While computers are outstanding at performing quick calculations and following strict logical rules, humans excel at making generalizations, drawing inferences, recognizing complex patterns, and experiencing emotions. Today, a new wave of researchers is developing neural networks, systems designed to function more like the human brain, bringing us a step closer to bridging the gap between artificial and human intelligence. In conclusion, remember these three key areas: computer metaphor and human cognition, where technology helps us understand how we think, cognitive science and neuroscience, where multiple disciplines work together to uncover how the brain and mind operate, and cognitive psychology, the central field that continues to reveal the inner workings of our thinking, memory, problem solving, and perception. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Your support really helps the channel grow. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to write them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.